Ooh, that looks tasty. Welcome folks, today the Hungry Gamer is back with another game review, and today we are talking about Godtear Eternal Glade Starter Set from Steam Forged Games. Now before I get started, please make sure you turn on your Klingon subtitles, because if I make any mistakes in the rules overview, that is where you will find the corrections. Now what this game is, this is a skirmish game which takes place in a world where all of the gods have died for various reasons, and as they died, they shattered, and god tears, or bits of divine essence, are falling down to the earth, or whatever the planet is, and these represent them down here. And various champions, which are these big guys, are gathering their warbands, as you can see, and they are running about trying to collect these god tears. And you're simply going to be battling it out, trying to be the one to get the most points, and you're getting points by controlling these things and killing each other and all of that. And last thing before I get started, I am doing this review from the perspective of just playing with a starter set. However, I did play with a bunch of different expansions, and I'll talk about that as well when I get to my final thoughts, but do understand that some of the things I will say is from the perspective of you only have a single starter set. Now, if you are not interested in how this game is played and just want to jump into my final thoughts, then you want to go to the timestamp on the screen right now. Let's jump in and talk about what's going to happen. In this game, you are racing to be the first one to get 5 victory points. And victory points are going to be given out based on, well, as you can imagine, how well you do each round. And they're going to be tracked over here. And you'll see I have this little round 1 marker here. And on the back, you'll see it's worth 1 point. However, round 2 is worth 2 points. Round 3 worth 3 points. Round 4 is worth 2 points. And then round 5 is worth 1 point. So really it's this middle of the game where you're going to be getting the most points. So if you manage to win rounds 2 and 3, then the game is already over. And you'll see there's this little battle ladder, they call it, where it goes back and forth, and whoever has it closer to their side at the end of the round will claim the points. And you're going to place it on the side that is closer to whoever's going first, because there's a slight disadvantage to going first in the first round. And what's going to happen is you're going to start the game and you're going to do your deployment, and you will have set up a different scenario. This is actually kind of the end result of a scenario that I played, but I'm not going to worry about that too much. The main difference is where you set up the god tier tiles on the board, and then what the player who is losing gets to do at the end of each round. Usually it results in being able to place more of these tiles somewhere out on the board, and you can place them out there kind of to your advantage. And what's going to happen is, first, one player is going to do their plot phase, and in that phase they're going to move their entire army around the board, following the rules set for those specific characters in the plot phase. And you'll notice these little ones, you can have up to 3 in a space, whereas the big ones are by themselves. Now, how that's going to work is, you have your little battle mat here, and you have, for your warband, your champion, and you have your minions. And all the minions have the same stats that do the same things, and all minions have 1 hit point, so they're going to die if they get hurt. And in the middle, you'll be using this spot to track your hero's hit points. And up here, you'll be tracking buffs and debuffs that are given to either your hero or to your minions as you're going through. But the core of what's going to happen is, when it's your turn in the plot phase, you will get to activate both of them, and they will both get to take 2 actions. And you can just do a move action, or you can do any of the actions that are here on the card. And you can do them whatever order you want. You can do your champion and then your minions, or your minions and then your champion. However, once you're done with doing whatever's on there, the cards are going to flip over. And that means you are going to be ready now for the clash phase. Here in the middle, you'll see a once per game power that your hero has, and it gives you a couple of different bonus rules about them, something that will always happen there. And depending on the class of hero you have, you'll get different bonus points ladder, depending on what you do. For example, the Shapers here get bonus points for controlling the god tiers with their banners during a round, while the Slayer right here gets bonus for knocking out the opposing champions. Now, briefly, I mentioned controlling the Godtears, and I mentioned that a few times, one of the other things that you're able to do, and you can only do during the plot phase, is you can control a Godtear area, which means you're going to place your banner on it. And you're going to get extra steps on the battle ladder at the end of the round if you still control one of these. And of course, the enemy champion can come through and remove it, as you can imagine. So then once this army has done all of their stuff, then in the other warband will get to do their plot phase. They would go through, do the same thing. Again, special abilities for each one. They would flip over, and once they're done, then we go into what is called the clash phase. Now, the clash phase is slightly different in that you will go whoever's the first player will do either their champion or their minions. Then the other player will get to do either their champion or their minions, and then back and forth. So plot phase, whole army moves, clash phase, back and forth by units. Now, this is how combat works. And in addition to combat, there will be times when you're just trying to put debuffs or buffs on opponents, you'll have to roll dice, but I will give a quick explanation of how combat and all of that works. So let's say that Morgan here wants to attack this itty bitty little courtsling right there. And so what will happen is, first we look and we see what ability Morgan is going to use. So we're going to assume that we're going to use this Ice Blade here. And we look, we see it has a range of 1. It rolls 5 dice to hit, and then we'll roll 5 dice to wound. Then we look at our courtsling right here, and we see that the courtsling has an agility of 2. That means I need to get at least 2 hits on my 5 dice in order to hit the courtsling. So here we have our dice, and we roll, and you see I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so I certainly hit. Then I get to roll 5 dice to see how many wounds I inflict on the courtsling. Now, we look again at our courtsling, we'll see right here, the courtsling has 4 defense, so I will subtract 4 from however many hits I get. And here, you'll see I wrote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so I did 1 wound. Again, we go back, we look, we see it only has 1 health. This courtsling has been defeated, and red would move 1 spot up on the battle ladder. As I mentioned earlier, all minions only have 1 health. And the key thing I'm going to point out here is every single unit has different things that they can do. They operate differently. For example, I will take these little skeletons here, and if we look at their card, we will see that the more of them that they have adjacent to the target, the better they are. So here, you'll notice range of 1, they get 2 to hit dice, and if they have 2 of them, they will do 4 dice of damage. So they would roll their 2. Here we see I did match the courtsling's agility of 2, which means then I get to roll 4 dice to try to damage and beat that 4. I did 4 exactly, so I do 0 damage. However, had I had a 3rd and a 4th cold bones right next to it, then I would have gotten to roll 4 dice and would have gotten 5 dice as I tried to wound it. And that's pretty much how this game works. As you can imagine, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of different warbands that you can get. The game is actually suggested that you have several warbands and each player uses a couple different warbands to make for a longer game. And each of them has different units with different rules, different cards. There's a bunch of different buffs and debuffs that you can get, but this is the core of how the game works. So what do I like about this game? The first thing is, I think when we're talking about skirmish games, that really puts it in many ways, a different niche than what I usually talk about. Because by the nature that they are skirmish games, that can be off-putting to a lot of people, because often skirmish games are filled with rules. Tons of rules, tons of things you have to track, tons of things you have to do. Yes, I can move, but in this case I can't move here because there's this and that. Not the case in Godtear, or Godtear. Tear, whatever. Not the case in Godtear. And if you've been following the channel, you know that I like a simple rule set, especially when that simple rule set can lead to a lot of variety in the gameplay. And this is a game that does that. You saw 2 different factions on the screen earlier when I did kind of the brief overview. And those are from one of the 2 starter sets. However, I've played with a bunch of different factions. In fact, check it out. I have these guys right here. And these right here. These right here. Oh, but wait, there's more. Oh, I got the centaur. And just in case one faction of orcs wasn't enough, boom, another faction of orcs. So I have a whole bunch of these different factions. And here's the thing that I really do adore about the game. They all play very, very differently. They have different numbers of units and all that. But even though they only have a few mechanics, right? There are 2 cards for each one, 4 if you count the flipping over, and 5 if you count the once per game ability. But they all do feel very different. And they feel different like in all the other skirmish games that I have played. I used to play Warhammer Fantasy way back in the day. And perhaps it's not as different as that because there's not as many units you can put out there at once. But the core of how they play feels as different as those various armies do. I've talked a lot about Omicron Protocol before. Oh, look, in fact, right there. Right there. 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 Ha. Yeah, I'm not really that much of a goober. It's just it's had the viewfinder and it's reversed and everything's reversed, whatever. But the point is, I've talked a lot about Omicron Protocol and how much I like that and the crazy differences and the wide variety in those different factions. And in Godtear, they're doing the same thing. However, all of that difference in the factions is coming in what is still a exceedingly light skirmish game. And you cannot frown at that. The next thing I'll say is I really do like the win mechanic. I like that it is that kind of push and pull each round. And as you're doing different things, you're going to be moving that victory point thingy back and forth. And I think that's fun. I think that's clever. But what I think I really like the most about it is the way that you're really battling it out to make sure you win round 3. Yes, you can win the game if you don't win round 3. But round 3, right when everyone should be in the middle, mixing it up, that's the key round. And I think that's great. Also, what that does is winds into my next thing is that this is a really, really fast game. The first time I set it out, and I just played against myself the first time, 2 factions. I set it out, even not fully understanding all the rules, having to stop and go and check. I played 2 different games in easily under an hour. Easily, probably under 45 minutes. And to me, that is just awesome because you can set the game up very quickly, you can play a game very quickly, and you can put it away very quickly. And then the final thing that I want to single out as something that is particularly praiseworthy is I like the 2 broad phases that you have in the game. I think it is really clever that you have the one phase where one side is going to move their entire army and do their stuff, try to get themselves set up. The other side gets to react. In the next phase, you're going to be doing it unit by unit, which also I think just, I don't know why I find that so intriguing, but I do. It's just fun and it keeps the game moving and it adds some variety to the game because you're not just doing the slugfest, you're kind of planting your flags and trying to hold them and you're putting buffs and debuffs on in that first phase and then you're trying to take advantage of what you set up in that previous phase, in the core phase of the game where you're rolling all the dice and stuff. I think that just is very, very clever and I like all of that. So what are my quibbles with the game? Well, the first one is it takes up a lot of space. It's a really large board, and I just have not found that you use all of it. You kind of wind up kind of focusing somewhat into the middle. Yes, with some of the scenarios as the Godtear areas are kind of spreading out or in different places, you might do different things, but a lot of times, especially in the first scenario that I recommend you play, you're just going to advance to the middle and you're just going to mix it up in the middle, which is not a bad thing, but there's a lot of space that doesn't always get used. And it can sometimes degenerate into feeling like you're just going to meet in the middle and fight. The next thing is one of the things that I already mentioned as something that I thought was rather praiseworthy, but you can lose the game in round 3. It's only a 5-round game, but if you lose the first 3 rounds, it's over, you're done. And in some ways, I think that's a good thing. You just, okay, well, you know this is over, stop, move on. But it could also be rather unsatisfying to you to have that happen. The next thing is, I've already praised the faction differences, but there's not a lot going on with them. Like I said, you got 2 different kinds of units, and they're going to do what they're going to do, and you're going to find different ways to use them, but you're not going to be able to build that faction in a way where you're going to be doing something drastically different within your faction each time. Now, as I said, I showed you all those different factions I have. I don't even think that's half of them. I think that's, I don't know, 35, 40% of them. In fact, there's another whole core box that you can get just to start with 2 different factions as the initial ones. So there's a lot of variety out there. But to get all that variety, you're going to need a bunch of boxes. And a bunch of those boxes are going to take up a lot of space, and it takes up a lot of space on the table. Just keep that in mind. And the last thing that I'll toss out is you see these really cool minis. And I should have mentioned the really cool minis at the beginning. I mean, these minis are really, really cool. A lot of good detail, just awesome. And like they're so cool. I could absolutely see if you're the type of person into role playing games where just pulling these things right out and just sticking them in there, painting it up, they'll look awesome. But you have these amazing minis, and they have cool abilities that are easy to understand. The artwork's cool, but there is not really much story to the game. I mean, yes, there is some story. You're dominating for this, but you see this, and a lot of people say, "Oh my gosh, it's going to be amazing." It doesn't have a lot of story to it. It's not a lot of there. This is a skirmish game. You're going to get this so you can mix it up with somebody, beat each other up, do a different scenario quickly, and beat each other up again. Grab different factions and beat each other up again. Like, that's all the game is. And I think it's doing it well. I think it's a very tight rule set, but it is only a skirmish game. And I know a lot of times we like to see these minis and think, oh my gosh, it's going to be such an amazing kind of dungeon crawl depth thing. That's not what this is. But there you have it, folks. That is Godtear. I have been very pleasantly surprised by this. If you know me, you know that skirmish games aren't necessarily my jam. But this one is fun. I do enjoy it, and I particularly enjoy it because it is very casual to learn it. It's easy to learn, easy to understand, but there is enough depth to it that there will be an element of skill that's going to start to come in. I mean, yeah, you're chucking dice and you may just never hit, and that's the way it goes. But you can improve, you can develop strategies, and it's so easy to get another faction, just toss one in there. And I think this really does work well. So there you have it, folks. That is Godtear. It's a cool one. If you like skirmish games, grab the base box, a couple other factions, and just see what it is, see what it's all about. It's just so quick and so easy with a lot of really juicy bits of strategy built in there. So there you have it, folks. As always, if I made any mistakes in the rules overview, please make sure you let me know in the comments with a timestamp so I can get that into the Klingon subtitles. As always, if you found this video useful, please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.